Hi, John here, that guy. So when you're buying a car, we have choices today. It's amazing some of the choices we have. Do you go with a gas engine? Do you go with a diesel? Do you go with an electric car or maybe a hybrid? Never had this many choices before in our lives, have we? Or have we? This picture over here is a Baker Electric. That was turn of the century 100 years ago, 120 years ago. That was an electric car, totally electric. It's an odd-looking car, granted, but New York City was full of them turn of the century. Particularly ladies loved them to go shopping. Doesn't have a steering wheel. It has a tiller. You just it's just a stick that you push it forward and it goes forward. You turn it with the stick. Just simple control. Jay Leno talks about he has one, and that's his wife's favorite car when they go looking at Christmas lights, probably because of the big giant windows it has. Another car that was real popular back then was steam cars. There were several varieties of steam cars. Stanley made a steamer. There was those several different companies that made steam cars, and that's technology that we haven't seen. I think the last one was probably mid-20s when they finally went away. But of course, we're all familiar with steam locomotives. We don't see those anymore. With most of the trains now are diesel. But the steam locomotives, I've seen a few of those operation when I was a kid, and you still see some in museums. Some of them still operating in museums. But yeah, steam was a popular option back then, and there were hybrid versions of the different cars, and just like we have hybrids today. It's interesting. I drive a car with an internal combustion engine, like most of us do. I prefer it. It's easy. It's simple. It's simple to operate, but and the fuel economy seems to be improving. My 2007 Ford standard base model F-150 that I'm sitting in right now, it doesn't give very good gas mileage. Now, it has a 6-cylinder engine, and it's an automatic. And even in spite of its age and the fact that it has 170,000 miles on it, it still gets about 18 miles to the gallon highway. And that's with this ethanol gas that we have today. Back when you could still get gas that didn't have ethanol in it, I would get 22 miles to the gallon. So, yeah, rethink the whole ethanol thing there, people. Let's get our stuff back together. At any rate, the new versions of this same truck get 24, 26 miles to the gallon for the same basic thing. So, yeah, it's improving a little bit. But is it improving fast enough? I read an article in a newspaper, in a Popular Mechanics magazine in 2005, and I remember it vividly. It had a profound impact on my thoughts when it comes to things like fuel economy. There was a race, and I don't know if they're still doing this. This was an annual race, and it was designed for engineering students and that type of thing to compete and to get them thinking about fuel economy. And basically this race didn't have anything to do with speed or who finished first or last. The race was who can create a vehicle that will carry a person and have the best fuel economy. And there was no limits on weight or safety equipment or any of that. It just had to be a vehicle that moved under its own power, and it had to carry a person. Pretty simple rules. And of course, a lot of them were built out of very lightweight bicycle frames with tiny little engines, because it didn't have to move fast at all. It just had to move under its own power and carry a person. Now, 2005, which was 15 years ago, a lot of things technologically have happened since then. But do you know how much the winner of that race, what their fuel economy was? And to be perfectly honest, the exact number escapes me, and if I can find it, I'll put it down here on the screen. But it was in the neighborhood of 4,000 miles per gallon. It might have been higher, but 4,000 is the number that comes to mind. And regardless of the number, it was a 4-digit number. And I've thought about that long and hard over the years. And when you look at the 6-cylinder engine in this base model 2007 Ford, it's mechanically not largely removed from the engine in a Model T Ford from 100 years ago. And yeah, my fuel economy might be a little bit better. I don't know exactly what kind of economy they got, but it's not largely removed from that in 100 years. Now, when you look at the technology of the rest of the world outside of the automotive industry from 100 years ago, we already had airplanes, but they were very basic. The Wright brothers and their first flight was in the very recent memory. Space travel hadn't even thought of from anybody except for Jules Verne, who wrote about it in their recent memory. But in all that time, computers were completely unthought of. But when you look at the technological advances we've made in computers and in aerospace industry and aircraft and in vehicle design and just technology in general, it's progressed rapidly. And I find it extremely difficult to believe, having said all that same basic engine hasn't been improved any more than it has. I find it difficult to believe that this truck I'm sitting in, although 13 years old and with high mileage, I have a hard time believing that they can't make that vehicle get at least 300 or 400 miles to the gallon. If you can make a lightweight frame with a gas engine carry a person and get 4,000 miles to the gallon, it's inconceivable to me that my truck or any of the average run-of-the-mill passenger cars that we see on the road today don't get several hundred miles to the gallon. The only reason is it's probably being suppressed. When I was a kid in the 70s, we kept hearing about somebody that created a carburetor that got 100 miles to the gallon. Well, I believe it. My grandfather claims to have met the man. But what would happen to that technology? Well, you're going to get, if you create that, you're going to get offers right away. And from not only automotive manufacturers, but probably oil companies, because they're the ones that are going to want to suppress that. Because if you're getting 20 miles to the gallon, and then you suddenly figure out a way to get 100 miles to the gallon, that's going to cut into their profit margin. So they're going to buy that patent up and make it go away and disappear, and nobody will ever hear from it again. And that's what I believe happened. Conspiracy theory? Yes. But is it true? A lot of conspiracy theories are. A lot of them aren't. I believe this one is true. But that's just my opinion. I'm John. I'm the Hat Guy. Hope everybody has a great day.